nashyate
Krishaya tapase cheha
Krishaya tapase cheha
Prityananta sukhaya cha
Prityananta sukhaya cha
Brahmanasya hidehoyam
Brahmanasya hidehoyam
Shudra kamaya nishyate
Shudra kamaya nishyate
Tisraya tapase cheha
Krishaya tapase cheha
Prityananta sukhaya cha
Prityananta sukhaya cha Brahmanasya hidehoyam Brahmanasya hidehoyam Shudra kamaya nishyate Shudra kamaya nishyate Krishaya tapase cheha Krishaya tapase cheha Prityananta sukhaya cha Prityananta sukhaya cha Brahmanasya hidehoyam Brahmanasya hidehoyam Shudra kamaya nishyate Shudra kamaya nishyate Krishaya tapase cheha Krishaya tapase cheha Prityananta sukhaya cha Prityananta sukhaya cha
Brahmanasya
Brahmanasya
of a Brahmana.
of a Brahmana
He certainly Deha
Deha
body
body
Ayam this
this
Kshudra
Shudra
insignificant
insignificant
Kamaya
Kamaya
for sense gratification
for sense gratification
not
not
Ishyate
Ishyate
is meant
is meant
Krishraya
Krishaya
for difficult
or difficult
Tapase
Tapase
austerities
austerities
Cha
Cha
also
also
Iha
Iha
in this world
in this world
Pritya
Pritya
after death
after death
Ananta
Ananda
unlimited
unlimited
Sukhaya
Sukhaya
happiness
happiness
Cha
Cha
also translation and report by disciples of the Divine Grace and Prabhupada ki. The body of a Brahmana is not intended to enjoy insignificant material sense gratification. Rather, by accepting difficult austerities in his life, a Brahmana will enjoy unlimited happiness after death. Kindly repeat after me. The body of a Brahmana is not intended to enjoy insignificant material sense gratification. Rather, by accepting difficult austerities in his life, a Brahmana will enjoy unlimited happiness after death. One may ask why a Brahmana should voluntarily accept inconvenience in keeping his body and soul together. In this verse, the Lord explains that advanced human life is meant for serious austerity and not for insignificant sense gratification. By spiritual advancement, one is fixed in transcendental bliss on the spiritual platform and gives up useless absorption in the temporary material body. One should remain detached from the material body, accepting only the bare necessities of life. The Brahmanas, by accepting a troublesome form of livelihood, never forget that the material body is destined to grow old, become diseased, and die in misery. Thus, remaining alert and transcendental, an advanced Brahmana at the end of his life, goes back home, back to Godhead, where he enjoys unlimited spiritual bliss. Without such higher awareness, how can one be considered a qualified Brahmana? Those devotees engaged in 24 hours a day in spreading the mission of Lord Krishna are beyond the platform of renunciation or sense gratification because they enjoy everything in Lord Krishna's service. A pure devotee of the Lord eats only to get strength for serving the Lord and does not accept either sumptuous or meager food simply for the body's sake. However, everything may be accepted for the Lord, even sumptuous meals. A Brahmana who is not working day and night to spread the glories of the Lord should feel embarrassed to eat sumptuously for his personal sense gratification. But a renounced Vaishnava preacher may accept invitations from all classes of pious people, and just to bless their homes, he will eat the opulent food they offer to him. Similarly, he sometimes eats sumptuously to get strength for defeating atheists and impersonalists. As stated in Vedic literature, one cannot be a highly qualified Brahmana unless one becomes a devotee of the Lord. And among the devotees, those who are preaching Krishna consciousness are the best, as confirmed by the Lord himself in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. A verse again. The body of a Brahmana is not intended to enjoy insignificant material sense gratification. Rather, by accepting difficult austerities in his life, a Brahmana will enjoy unlimited happiness after death. So this is important instruction being given here by the Lord that a Brahmana naturally is one who has or is cultivating transcendental knowledge, who is firmly convinced that he is not this body, that this body does not belong to him, that this body belongs to the Supreme Lord, has been created by the Lord. Mama evangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. And therefore, the body is meant to be used in the service of the Lord. A nice example of Srila Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami was visiting Jagannath Puri, and because in those days one had to travel under difficult conditions, people still travel under difficult conditions. Even traveling by airplane, there's so many inconveniences one has to accept. But 500 years ago, if one had to go from, which was the case of Sanatana Goswami, coming from Vrindavan to Jagannath Puri, one had to travel by foot, and this particular time that he had come to Jagannath Puri, he had contracted some disease, very serious disease, which was the effect of that disease. What was the name of that disease? Some kind of leprosy.
No, but just like pus.
Yeah, the body was full of different sores. Prabhupada explains in one lecture there's two kinds of such sores. One is a wet sore and one is a dry sore. Prabhupada, coming from medical background, knew many things. So the type of disease that Sanatana Goswami had contacted was the wet one. Means that pus was oozing from these sores, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was completely on the transcendental platform, he was very, of course, affectionate to his devotees, and to many of those devotees who were very close to Lord Chaitanya, if he would meet them after some time, he would embrace them. So, following that same practice, Lord Chaitanya was every day when he would meet Sanatana Goswami, who had returned from Vrindavan, he would embrace him. But Sanatana Goswami had this disease, and he felt very bad that the Lord is, even though I'm trying to avoid touching the Lord, because the pus from my body is actually touching his body. So he felt very, very bad about that situation. Lord Chaitanya was totally transcendental, not at all bothered by that. But Sanatana Goswami felt very bad to the point of actually thinking, I cannot continue to offend. He felt he was actually offending the Lord in this way. And he was actually seriously considering giving up his body, committing suicide to avoid what he considered were offenses to the Lord. So the Lord, who is omniscient, could understand the mood or the mentality of Sanatana Goswami, and very nicely instructed him the following day that you're thinking in this way, but you should know that actually this body of yours doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me, and there are many services that need to be done utilizing this body. So this is one nice example, which was pointed out by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that one who is actually a Brahmana, cultivating nicely this knowledge, the beginning of knowledge we hear from Shastra is Aham Brahmasmi. Aham Brahmasmi, I am first and foremost the spirit soul. I am that spirit soul. I am not this body. Of course, because we are entrapped in this material body, because we are for a very, very long time connected with this material energy under the control of the modes of material nature, we naturally have been, since time immemorial, practically speaking, identifying. For as long as we have been in this material world, we've been identifying with this body. And this identification with the body is so deeply rooted that even we begin to cultivate this knowledge of Krishna consciousness, even one develops this Brahmana consciousness, still it is that identification, false identification, remains even after cultivating. Means it takes some time to actually completely break away, and that, of course, that is a whole science. That is the science, and the only science that we call the science of bhakti, or the science of devotional service, that can actually bring us to that point of completely breaking with this false identification, which is deeply rooted as ahankar, this false ahankar, false identification with the material body. So, in the 14th chapter, actually, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains this point as well, whereby as one, where are we here? Yeah, as one cultivates this knowledge, 14, yes. One one will be able to, even while residing in this body, this verse, text number 20, you can repeat. This is the chapter where Lord Krishna explains about the modes of material nature and how when one is able to, by cultivation of knowledge, transcend these modes of material nature, he can be in this life, even in this material body, this material world, can begin to experience the transcendental happiness. And this is text 20. Gunan etan atityatrin dehi deha samudbhavan janma mrityu tara dukkhaye vimukto mritam asnute. The translation: when the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. So that means the verse here is referring to enjoying nectar, or experiencing transcendental bliss after leaving this body. This verse in the Bhagavad Gita is explaining how what the liberated souls, the Mukta Jiv, experience in the spiritual world can also be experienced in this material world by the process that Krishna, of course, explains after a few verses in that 14th chapter, by the process of bhakti, or devotional service. So therefore, Brahmanas are therefore so important in society. They are meant to teach not only verbally by giving discourses and seminars, etc. But they are meant to teach by personal example. Previously, brahmanas who were following strictly, they became very, very powerful. Well, we see the example of the son of a brahmana at the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole incident of Parikshit Maharaj meeting this sadhu in his hermitage who was in Samadhi. So although his son, who came to know about the incident of his father having been insulted, immediately cursed, although he was just, I think, he was a young boy, maybe 10 years of age or so. So even at such young age, when one is, just like somebody shared yesterday or the day before, I think it was shown on one of our, I think the Global Varnashram Mission, this short clip of this little boy playing with other, when we see, just a very open, casual interview, children are innocent. They're very natural, and we can see by the responses. I don't know, this boy must have been what, 4 or 5, very young, but was very clear in his thinking and speaking, and also was, as Prabhupada did also, because he was born in a Vaishnava family, was able to learn the harmonium way back at that time. Didn't have to spend hours and hours. When one is older, as we discussed the other day, it usually takes longer time to learn anything, to learn language or to learn music or whatever. So it means when the situation is favorable, and this particular example of this Gurukul boy is very inspirational in that it shows us how, if one is given the opportunity to be raised in the ideal setting where one feels completely fully, he was very at ease, his legs spread out, and just he was like in his most natural, feeling very at ease, being a devotee and speaking about Krishna, and having learned already to play the mridanga and chanting the holy name. So it means that even from a very young age, when the atmosphere is proper, one can begin to show symptoms. So in other words, if this is done on a larger scale, then you have more such examples of individuals who actually are demonstrating or showing symptoms of being devotees, and what is being mentioned here, developing these Brahminical qualities or qualifications. The foremost, of course, being that one is transcendentally situated and therefore immersed in transcendental happiness. So that is the we identify Vedic culture as being Brahminical culture, Vedic culture is Brahminical culture. Vedic culture is also cow culture, because one of the nice prayers that we find in the Shastra, this Gomati Vidya prayers, very wonderful prayers, glorifying the mother cow. So in one of those verses it explains that the cows, the brahmanas, they belong to the same family because they are both in a mode of goodness. So whole Vedic culture, that's why Namo Brahmanya Devaya, Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha. Go Brahmana. And one purport, actually Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada mentions how more important to serve the cows than the brahmanas. I mean, that's similar to what Krishna explains also. I'm more pleased when my devotees are cared for or served. So Brahminical culture is what Srila Prabhupada wanted to introduce actually all over the world, and what this Krishna consciousness movement is all about. So this is a nice verse here, that one who is actually situated in transcendental knowledge will never improperly or not properly utilize his body for sense gratification. His body is belonging to Krishna and is meant especially for preaching the message of the Lord. So we'll go to the next verse. Actually, I think we read this verse yesterday. But there's always things to learn. So text 43 that we had started to read also yesterday. Shilon cha vritya paritusta chitto.
Shilon cha vritya paritusta chitto.
Dharmam mahantam virajam jushana.
Dharmam mahantam virajam jushana.
Maya kritatma kriha eva tishthan.
Maya kritatma kriha eva tishthan.
Nati prasakta samupayati shantim.
Nati prasakta samupayati shantim.
Translation and purport. A Brahmana householder should remain satisfied in mind by gleaning rejected grains from agricultural fields and marketplaces, keeping himself free of personal desire. He should practice magnanimous religious principles with consciousness absorbed in me. In this way, a Brahmana may stay at home as a householder without very much attachment and thus achieve liberation. Brahmanas are actually rare. I mean, Brahmanas who have this kind of mentality, who display these types of qualities, who are fixed on their identity as not being this body but eternal souls, eternal spirit souls. So here's a short purport. Mahantam. Mahantam refers to magnanimous, just like Mahatma. Mahantam refers to magnanimous religious principles, such as very hospitably receiving guests, even those who are uninvited from any country, as happened a few days ago, who are invited and unexpected. Actually, in the Vedic culture, generally, generally it is only sadhus who are allowed to come unexpectedly. What's it called? Atiti. Atiti. But in modern times, people sometimes commit this kind of mistake of just dropping in and unexpectedly. One should inform people whom they visit as a general rule. Yeah. But here it mentions that one who is highly developed in consciousness, one of the features of such a person is that he will know how to receive guests, even those who are uninvited or who come unexpectedly. Householders must always be magnanimous and charitable to others, being alert to curb unnecessary affection and attachment in family life. So actual householders, although they may have children, they are meant to develop a much broader consciousness that ultimately, just like it is said, householders should see all brahmacharis as their children, all sannyasis as their children also, because it is the householders who are meant to actually support such individuals who are meant to be, in turn, completely absorbed and involved in living their particular ashram, and which means, of course, being very ideal in their sadachar, in their character, in their behavior, and also being very focused and fixed on preaching the mission of the Lord. In the past, very renounced Brahmana householders would collect grains that had fallen on the ground in the marketplace, or those that had been left behind in the fields for harvesting. Of course, here it mentions in the past, which is true when majority of people all over the world were living off the land. So some of the brahmanas would collect leftovers from the field or from places where they sell grains. But even not only in the past, even now, I mean, I remember when we were newly joined devotees, and this went on for some time. Devotees in those days especially would go out on Harinam and would go to the marketplace and get donations because usually people, they want to buy only things that are completely looking very nice, very attractive, and so therefore those who are selling produce, they will be cautious to remove anything. If there's anything that's not quite right, they'll put it aside. So devotees would collect these things actually, because most of the, you just cut off the part that's not proper, and so we would collect many things actually, and they would be happy to give it, because otherwise they would just throw it away. So this is what is being referred to here. The most important item here is Mai Arpitatma. Mai Arpitatma, or fixing the mind in Lord Krishna. Despite his material situation, anyone who constantly meditates upon the Lord can become liberated, can become a liberated soul. So, yes, if one is highly advanced in Krishna consciousness, then one's material situation will not in any way affect him. This cannot be practiced artificially, but that is part of what we are meant to practice, of course, as devotees. The more we are far removed from the body platform, we will not be disturbed by otherwise disturbing situations. And just to finish the purport here, despite his material situation, anyone who constantly meditates upon the Lord can become a liberated soul, as stated in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-2, verse 187. Iha yasya hare radasye
Ihayasya hare dasye
karmana manasa gira
Ramana manasa gira
nikila svapi avastasu
Nikila swapi avasthasu
jivan mukta sa uchyate.
Jivan mukta sa uchyate.
A person acting in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, in the service of Krishna, with his body, mind, intelligence, and words, is a liberated person, even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. Yes. Okay, our last verse. Samudharanti vipram
Samudhananye vipram
siddhantam matparayanam
Siddhantam matparayanam
tan udarishye nachirat
Tanudharishye nachirat
apadyo naur ivar navat.
Apadyo narivarnavat.
Translation. Purport: just as a ship rescues those who have fallen into the ocean, similarly, I very quickly rescue from all calamities those persons who uplift brahmanas and devotees suffering in a poverty-stricken condition. That's nice. It means that Krishna becomes obligated and reciprocates with those who care for his devotees, for those who are in needful conditions. Purport: the Lord is has described how brahmanas and devotees achieve the perfection of life, and now a similar perfection is offered to those who utilize their materialistic wealth to relieve the poverty-stricken condition of devotees and brahmanas. Although one may neglect the devotional service of the Lord to pursue a material life of sense gratification, one can rectify one's position by dedicating one's hard-earned money to the service of the Lord. Seeing the difficult austerities accepted by saintly persons, a pious person should make arrangements for their comfort. This is nicely displayed. It's an integral part of Vedic culture. We see this when we travel in certain areas, certain places, like we travel in Haridwar, on that side especially. I think other similar holy places, they have dharmashala. They provide free food. They help. They're supporting those who take it upon themselves to travel to such holy places because there's some hardship involved, and they usually Marwadis, right? Marwadis are people from Vaishya background. Has been and continues to be, possibly less nowadays, but the tradition to support in different ways those who are practicing a spiritual life, who are taking the trouble to travel to such holy places. Seeing the difficult austerities accepted by saintly persons, the pious person should make arrangements for their comfort, just as a boat saves hopeless people who have fallen into the ocean. Similarly, the Lord uplifts persons who have hopelessly fallen into the ocean of material attachment if they have been charitable to the brahmanas and devotees. One time I was in the airport and I was dressed like as a devotee, usually travel that way. And I was just maybe standing or sitting, and one unknown person with a beard, maybe from some other religious background, came up to me and gave me a donation. It was just $1, but people have that tendency. It is there also in other religions of being well disposed, of being charitable towards people who are brahmanas or people who are who wear the dress of the renounced order. Okay, any comments, questions? Therefore, the glories of brahmanas. This was nicely pointed out in that Leela or pastime when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was invited to speak with the intent of being actually challenged for what he was teaching. I think it was in Midnapur, in Bengal somewhere. I think the province or the district of Midnapur. But he could not go because he was ill. And at that time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, although still quite relatively young, offered to go in his place. And I think it's narrated in the documentary that Bhakti Saruma Maharaj made on Prabhupada, recalling some leelas of the past. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had taken the time to extract from so many different sources the glories of brahmanas. Because the brahmanas we're reading about brahmanas now, they're actual brahmanas, qualified brahmanas are an absolute necessity or must in society to properly guide society, etc. But so after glorifying the brahmanas, then he began to glorify Vaishnavas. And there are so many, in a similar way, so many wonderful verses in the Shastras that is glorifying the Vaishnavas. Anyways, that was a historical speech that then defeated the intent of those malicious persons. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Jai Sri Prabhupada Ki. All the people. And okay, we have a very, very sunny day.